Welcome to the Three Rivers Podcast for Wednesday, April 24th. I am your host, Ed Troop. Glad you can join us today here live on Oneberg Facebook and Oneberg YouTube channel. Or maybe you're listening on Spotify. Make sure you download our newest podcast each and every week right here on Spotify. Coming up on today's show, where it's all about the Steelers draft. The NFL draft is tomorrow, Thursday, April 25th. Who will the Steelers pick at that number 20 spot? Also, the Pittsburgh Pirates are now 13-11 after going 3-7 in their last 10 games. But the Bucs have put together back-to-back wins at PNC Park against the first-place Brewers the last couple nights. Are the Bucs back on track? And the WPIAL recently realigned their football classifications and conferences for the 2024 upcoming football season. The Aliquippa Clips are being forced to play up in Class 5A and have sued the PIAA over that. Our WPIAL insider from the Triblive High School Sports Network, Don Rebel, will join us to discuss that and more. And joining me to discuss all this and more is my partner, Brian Carruthers. Has not been on the last few weeks, but we welcome him back here today. Brian, I'm excited, man. Tomorrow night, we got to talk about this. Thursday at Stage AE, we will have Oneberg live coverage of the Draft 412 Pro Football Draft Party all night long as the NFL first-round draft takes place. I will also be on the stage as part of a panel discussing the NFL draft as well. It's going to be a fun night.
Yeah, no doubt. I can't wait to see you up there with all the other elite NFL draftsmen who will break it down for us normal people who don't understand, who just want to get a jump start on drinking and eating for the 2024 Steelers season.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot going on at Stage E. We'll have live Oneberg coverage all night long with yourself.
Yeah.
I'll be joining you for a while too, so definitely looking forward to that event. And maybe
it's going to be a lot of fun, man. And I was there on Monday. Stage AE. It doesn't get enough credit for what a cool venue it is, so hopefully we can show that off. And there's still tickets available, so if you want to get the party started right for the season, the Russell Wilson season, this is the official place to do it. And I know there's a lot of draft nerds heading there tomorrow night. Can't wait to see them.
Hey, man, we welcome you back. You've been gone for a few weeks. You went to the Florida like 3 or 4 weeks ago for the start of the MLB season, the Pirates playing in Miami, and then you disappeared on us. You went bucko crazy, and we haven't seen you in weeks. But now here you're back.
Yes.
We're going to talk about it in a little bit, but your Buccos back-to-back wins against the first-place Brewers the last 2 nights. Some really solid starting pitching, and David Bednar might be back.
Maybe he's back. As Derek Shelton said, he didn't have much of a spring, so this is like his spring, which is kind of weird. But anyway, the reason I haven't been here is my psychiatrist told me that I shouldn't go into a negative space with you because you're so anti-Bucco that it doesn't do anything for my soul or my spirit, my family life. So the psychiatrist said, take a month off and see if Troop can get positive.
Listen, if anybody's been listening or watching the podcast since the start of the Bucco season, I've been Bucco proud each and every week. Speaking of Bucco proud, our next guest, very much Bucco proud. There he is, Don Rebel from the Triblive High School Sports Network, my good friend for over 20 years. Don, welcome to the podcast.
Ed, Brian, Ed. A little throwback. Good to see both of you guys.
Yeah, definitely.
Little throwback indeed. And Don, we definitely want to talk about the WPIAL football realignment and the Aliquippa Clips being a big part of that here in a little bit. But let's first start with the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are on the clock, if you will. 20th pick tomorrow. The NFL draft taking place for 2024 here. The Steelers have really zoned in on a couple different areas. We've talked about it here the last month on the podcast: offensive line, defensive back, wide receiver. But let's start first and foremost. Your thoughts on the Steelers going into this draft, the offseason, everything that's taken place so far.
Well, I mean, I think that they have been very aggressive in what they've been doing this offseason. Obviously, it starts with the upheaval of the quarterback room. Brian mentioned it, the Russell Wilson era about to begin. Josh Fields, who even before the Steelers signed Wilson, there were rumors that they were interested in getting Fields to be their starting quarterback. Now he comes in almost as a 1B type quarterback. So, they've changed that. The one thing that when this leadership group took over a few years ago, they've sort of really zeroed in on changing the offensive line, which was a struggle big time in the last few years of the Ben Roethlisberger era, and the last couple of years with Kenny Pickett. It has progressed. 2 years ago, it was a little better. Last year was a little better. But they are definitely looking to upgrade at center, obviously. And obviously at tackle, too. A lot of rumbles that they would love to get a tackle in the first round. So, I like what Omar Khan has done. I think they realize that their two studs on defense, Watt and Fitzpatrick, are sort of now in the prime. So, they don't want to go into some sort of slow rebuild, but they want to take advantage of those guys playing their best football, and they've definitely been aggressive this offseason.
Well, let me throw this out here, Dawn, and get your opinion on it. And let me just first say, I am a Mike Tomlin fan, and I hope he coaches the Steelers as long as he wants to. I am not a 8-8 ain't great kind of guy. But maybe he realized that grooming a new quarterback isn't that fun, right? He came in and had Roethlisberger, who was, again, like you said, in his prime. And I don't know, to guide Pickett and Rudolph and Trubisky, God forbid, it doesn't seem like that fun of a task to try to groom people to be great quarterbacks. It seemed like he hit it off with Wilson. This should be a match made in football heaven. Tomlin, a great coach, and Wilson, who doesn't really need coached.
Well, first of all, Brian, I echo your sentiments, and we might be in the minority, but I agree with you about what you said about Mike Tomlin. In this day and age where the ebb and flow of franchises, it's great when New England's up here and when Kansas City's up here, but those teams, as we saw with the Patriots, come crashing down. And it's never been like this for the Steelers. It's always been really up here, not in the middle, but they've had, a bad year for them is 8-8. So, I think we're a little spoiled, and that's fine.
Sure. And ask Bill Belichick what he thinks about guiding rookie and new quarterbacks.
Right. And I don't think that their intent, as soon as that Buffalo playoff game ended, was to blow up the quarterback room. I think that there was questions whether they would bring Mason Rudolph back to compete for the starting job with Kenny Pickett. The Russell Wilson thing sort of fell in their lap, right? I mean, Denver did not want him on their roster anymore, and they were willing to pay him to walk. They're eating all that money in one of the worst trades in recent NFL history. So that whole thing just sort of fell in the Steelers' lap. Minimum wage for a possible future Hall of Fame quarterback. And then when Kenny Pickett, depending on who you listen to, didn't want any parts of competing or playing behind Wilson. He made that opinion known, so the Steelers dealt him, and then that's when the other domino fell with Fields. So I'm not sure that they were looking to blow up the quarterback room. It just so happened that it did. But I think I don't know that too many people would argue that they're not in a better situation now than they were before.
Right. And the flexibility. They just said I saw today that we're not picking up Justin Fields' final year of whatever money that goes. I have no idea what that even means. But both of these guys are on 1-year deals. So if they suck, they're gone, and we'll figure out life after Ben. But for right now, I don't know. It seems like it's a good deal all around.
Yeah, and if you get one of them, whether it be Wilson or if Wilson doesn't pan out, you give Fields a shot and you like what you see with him. You're exactly right. They're not married to them long term. Yet, if one of them really shines and they feel good about bringing them back, they can. And it doesn't have to be a long deal. I mean, some people would say, well, you're kicking the can down the road. But, if you can compete with veteran quarterbacks in a league that thrives under veteran quarterbacks who can still get the job done, and that's assuming they can, we'll find out, then I think you're a lot better off. But if, like you said, Fields doesn't get an opportunity, Wilson doesn't work out, you walk away from both, and then you address quarterback next season.
You are watching and listening to the Three Rivers podcast for this week, April 24th. I am Ed Troop, Brian Carruthers, and Don Rebel joining us from the Triblive High School Sports Network. We're talking NFL draft. Tomorrow, Thursday, is the first round of the NFL draft. The Steelers have the 20th pick overall. And gentlemen, Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin met with the media this past week, and a new Tomlinism for you, if you will. They said, "We are not thirsty at any position." Not thirsty at any position due to our success in the free agency. So, boy, I love that. And it tells you a lot that they're kind of open to really any position. I heard the Steelers' approach is not a mock draft when they prepare for these drafts. It's more of they rank their top 30 or 40 players, specifically their top 20 for this draft, and whoever's available at number 20 is who they'll go with regardless of the position.
Well, let's be honest. Their draft board is going to contain a lot of top tackles, some centers, receivers, and cornerbacks, the positions of need. You're not going to see too many tight ends or guards at the top of their draft board. That being said, and this goes back, I think, to the Kevin Colbert days, the Steelers have always done a great job in the offseason, free agency. Again, everybody knows they don't go after the big fish in free agency, but they do a nice job of getting starter-like players to come in to fill holes so that when they get to this point, the draft, they don't have any glaring holes. They don't have to reach for a position. Now, that being said, I think everyone knows we need a starting center or a center that eventually will be the starter. We're light in the wide receiver room. We need a slot corner. But that being said, they've done a nice job filling holes to where if the season started tomorrow, they could put out a starting lineup on both offense and defense that could get the job done. That being said, you are at least, I think they have 4 picks in the first 3 rounds. You're looking for a couple of starters, immediate starters, and definitely 4 long-term starters come this weekend.
Ed, that blew my mind of what you said. People accuse me of being Kenny Pickett obsessed. Who overrode that system when we picked Kenny Pickett number 1 overall, that we had a list of the 40 best players and we just go in line of who we want? Who overrode it that year? But yeah, I guess you're right. Don, take the center, do something logical, do something unsexy, and build this team.
By the way, the exact quote from Tomlin and Omar Khan: "We are not overly thirsty at any position." Overly thirsty.
Well, that still means you're thirsty. It doesn't mean you're obsessed with thirst. They're thirsty.
Yeah, I think what that means is they have a second receiver or a guy who could be the second receiver on opening day. They have a guy they can plug in at center, probably Herbig. They have a guy they could plug in at slot corner, but they are definitely looking for upgrades Thursday and Friday especially.
Well, guys, we could do a 30-hour show on dissecting what Tomlinisms mean. So I guess we'll just say maybe Tomlin's going to pick somebody on Thursday.
That was a new one, so I really like that one.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the players coming up in the draft. The top quarterbacks should go 1, 2, 3 as it sits now. The Bears, Commanders, and Patriots own the first 3 picks. Caleb Williams, pretty much a given to go to Chicago at number 1. Jaden Daniels from LSU, Commanders looking for him, and then possibly Drake May to the Patriots at 3. There could be some movement there with some trades. J.J. McCarthy, of course, from Michigan is out there as well in those first few picks. But when you go all the way down towards number 20, a few positions and a few players that I've kind of highlighted possibly for the black and gold to draft for their first pick if available. Amarius Mims, Don, from Georgia, another offensive tackle that they can put opposite side of Broderick Jones. Man, when you look at Mims, 6'8", 340, he could be a good fit on the other side. You mentioned center. Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon has been the big talk at the center position for the Steelers. The latest rumor is the Steelers could possibly trade up in this draft, get into the top 11 or 12 picks, and go after the Toledo cornerback, Quinion Mitchell from Toledo, who's
what's his name?
Quinion Mitchell.
Quit. All right, we'll work on that if he becomes a draft pick for us, right?
From Toledo. Yeah, I guess you have to go with something there. But
Wainland. Yeah, good.
Wainland, there you go. He is rated the top defensive back in the draft right now going in. So, a few options. You guys still there?
Oh,
I am.
Can you guys hear me?
what was your
We're
question?
back.
Repeat your question.
Yeah.
I-
We're in a war zone. We couldn't get the question. Go over it one more time.
I froze on my end. I apologize, guys. Don, what do you think about the Steelers' first pick?
It's all right.
I don't think they're going to go center. I know Jackson Powers Johnson was early on the pick. There are some concerns. He's had a couple of concussions, but Troy Polamalu had a couple of concussions at USC. So I don't know that they're going to address center right off the get-go. I think I don't think they're going to trade up because I don't think they want to give up the picks that would need to move up. But if they do, I could see them going for the Alabama tackle. J.C. Latham is a right plug-and-play tackle. Put him and Jones bookends for hopefully many, many years. That's a great start to an offensive line. If those tackles are all gone, I could see them trading down. They usually don't trade down, and I don't think I'm not saying way down, maybe like into the mid-20s, because there's a lot of players in that area that they probably like, and if they can pick up an additional draft pick or two on day two, then that's even more of a bonus because you look at overall needs: center, offensive tackle, wide receiver, and that might be two wide receivers because they're a little light in that room. Same with cornerback, maybe an outside corner, maybe a slot corner, and you also don't want to ignore the defensive line with Cam Hayward getting up there in years and sort of winding down his career. I mean, I could see them go corner in a stretch, maybe after trading down, but I think it's going to be offensive tackle or wide receiver at the 20 pick.
There's a lot of options.
I think the
What do you
Steelers are going to go
Ed?
after Mims, the tackle from Georgia, is who I like the most in that situation. I like the center as well. But, boy, it's tough to pass up one of these big-time wide receivers or a defensive back, too. I kind of agree with what, Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin said this past week. They're not overly overwhelmed, thirsty, whatever you want to talk about at any position right now. They can go.
Wait, Ed, you're not overly thirsty for any
go
position?
after, pretty much anything at this spot. I don't see that. I agree with Don, though. I don't see them trading up. To try to get somebody. I think number 20 will be their slot. I think that's what the selection they'll make for best available at that position at that time. And there's another name too, Cooper DeJean from Iowa, who's another very good corner that could also be there at number 20. And they've had him in recently too, so that's another name, Don, that the Steelers could possibly go get.
He's got great flexibility. He could play inside corner. He could play outside corner. He could play safety. So they really love that versatility. He's a ball hawk from Iowa, being a Hawkeye. The one thing I will say, Ed, I'm not sure about the Mims pick, not to rain on your parade, but I've been doing that for so long, I'll continue to do it.
That's right.
That's right. Please do. This is what the show's all about.
Mims could be a dominant player in the NFL, but that's really a big question mark now. I think they're looking for, again, the whole win now mentality, and he would be more of a project. I don't know that they are going to, at least this year, take a project in the first round. I think if one of those top 5 tackles is not available at 20, again, the option is either take a receiver, Cooper DeJean would be nice, or to just drop back and a few picks and pick up another round 2 selection.
Guys, do you see anything that could happen Pickett-wise where the Steelers surprise everybody with a pick that we never saw coming? Or are they done surprising people because it's been a busy offseason for them?
I think if they traded up and went after like Michael Penix from Washington or something like that as a quarterback, I think that would be a very surprising move, being that they just brought Russell Wilson and Justin Fields in, right, Don?
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know that they'd have to trade up for Penix, but maybe the way the draft, I think the Vikings are going to go up to get a quarterback, maybe McCarthy. So you really almost have to sit and watch and see how it's playing out if that's what you want to do. I just don't know that they're going to do that now because, as we talked about earlier, all the reps in training camp are going to go to Wilson and Fields. And so, that's a little unfair to bring in a high-profile quarterback. Yeah, that guy might be your quarterback of the future beginning next year, but he's not going to get a whole lot of reps here this fall. So I'm not sure that's the way to go. Again,
unless Wilson can't perform on the field and you do want to give a younger guy an opportunity to learn. You weren't going to learn anything under Pickett or even Rudolph, barely Trubisky. Maybe you do bring a younger guy in who can learn just by being in the same room as these guys.
Well, if Wilson doesn't play out, then it goes to Fields.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't know that you want to have that negative mentality that, well, we brought this guy in and we have high hopes, but if he doesn't work, I know there's always, you got to have ifs. There's no question about it. But again, I think there's a little more urgency that they want to get somebody who really can start from day one in that first round.
You are watching the Three Rivers podcast for April 24th. I am Ed Troop, joined by Brian Carruthers and Don Rebel of the Triblive High School Sports Network. And Don, let's transition over and talk some WPIAL football. The realignment just released a little over a month ago now for the 2024 fall season. Some movement between some different classifications. Within the classification, teams that did not move out did go to some different conferences and some different setups. But I think the most glaring one is the Aliquippa Quips, right? 2 years ago, they avoided having to play up. They stayed where they were, but not this time around. The WPIAL, the PIAA, forcing the Quips to go to Class 5A this upcoming season, in which Aliquippa now has taken legal action here recently against the PIAA, trying to prevent that move from 5A. Remember, guys, Aliquippa is a 1A, maybe 2A school that's been playing up for years because they've been so successful and so good, winning WPIAL championships as well as PIAA state championships as well. Don, I want to get your thoughts. We'll go class by class here in a second, but let's first start with the Aliquippa Quips. Your thoughts?
Well, by Brian's reaction, I guess he is pro-litigation. That's what I took from that.
I have Johnny Cochran on standby at all times, Don.
So the Aliquippa story is intriguing. They, for years, have been a Class A enrollment school, but they always played up. Went back before the expansion to 6 classifications. They played in Class 2A because that's where all their rivals were: New Brighton, Beaver Falls. When the expansion in 2017 to 6 classifications, their rivals moved by enrollment up to 3A. So that's Aliquippa moved up. They were playing 2 classes over their enrollment and playing in 3A. And as we all know, they have dominated no matter what classification they're playing in. The PIAA, trying to deal with the whole transfer situation that was sort of running amok, came up with this rule a few years ago where it was a point system based on your success in the district playoffs and in the state playoffs, and based on that's one part of it. The key part is transfers, number of transfers. If you had more than 3 transfers in a 2-year period, then you were going to be moved up a class. And when Aliquippa was first dinged by this rule 4 years ago, and they were forced to move up from 3A to 4A, they protested because they said, we get the spirit of the rule, but we're technically a 1A school, so we should be moved up to 2A, or in that case, they'd be moving down. PIAA disagreed. Aliquippa, the last 4 years has played at 4A, and they have had tremendous success in Class 4A. Well, now that rule came in, every 2 years, the PIAA, based on enrollment, will realign the numbers for each classification. And based on the numbers, plus, again, the transfer situation, which is really the crux behind Aliquippa's complaint, they were forced to move up to 5A. They are in 5A with the new alignment. They have a 5A schedule handed out by the WPIAL, but they appealed to the WPIAL. Really, it's really more of a PIAA thing, the state, because it's the state's role about moving up. They appealed. PIAA said, no, you're in 5A. They have now, as you indicated, taken it to court. It's going to be a mess if the court decides and rules in Aliquippa's favor, because, again, the schedule is set. For the WPIL for these next 2 years, they're going to have to, Aliquippa would drop back to 4A. They would have to realign everything. They would have to, for 5A and 4A, redo schedules. So I don't know. I don't know the timetable of when a decision will be made, but it's definitely intriguing. That's for sure.
Well, let me ask this, Don, since you're the guru for how many years of high school sports in Pittsburgh. Here's a white trash opinion, which is mine. The real problem in this high school sports setup is that Catholic and private schools can recruit kids, and you see that they win state championships, whether it's Lincoln Park for everything, whether it for basketball, whether it's the place in Philly that beat Franklin Regional. It's almost like a wag the dog. Like, let's mess with Aliquippa and get the headlines, but we really can't figure it out is what to do with these Catholics.
Well, I mean, that's a separate issue, and that's probably, to me, a bigger issue than this whole rule of forcing teams to play up because of their success and transfers into their school. I mean, the PIAA, they feel that their hands are tied. They realize there's a problem with what they call boundary and non-boundary schools, that the cards aren't even when it comes to the comparisons between the two. But they can't do anything from a legal standpoint. It would have to come from state legislation, because when the PIAA opened the doors for private schools back in the 70s, now for the PIAA to say, well, no, we're going to have two separate playoffs, all it would take is someone to challenge them in court, and they would probably lose. So they need that to come from state legislation to change and allow them to.
Here's where I would bring it from. And I agree with you, but here's where I would bring it from. Let's take a book out of NCAA college football. They got it wrong with the ACC this year, with the ACC and Florida State not being in a national championship game. And so none of their kids played. If I was Franklin Regional and I was going up against a team that recruited from kids from New Jersey, weird how that happens in Pennsylvania state championships, I wouldn't play. I would say that we won as far as we can, and our bus, we'll take our freshmen and our feel goods, but I'm not playing.
Well, you could do that, but I mean, the spirit of competition, right? I mean, there's always that chance that you can go and because obviously if you're at that point in the season, you got a pretty good team yourself.
Definitely.
So you want to slay Goliath. But yeah, I mean, St. Joe's Prep, they've dominated 6A football. They got players from New Jersey. They got players from Delaware. I think they got players from New York. I mean, it's
insane.
It really is crazy. The beef from our side of the state is that the WPIAL has always closely monitored transfers, and that's not always the case on the other side of the state with other districts. The PIAA only gets involved when there is a challenge of a district ruling. So, I mean, there are so many things that can be improved and or fixed when it comes to scholastic sports, and you bringing up the boundary, non-boundary thing is probably at the top of that list.
We're talking with Don Rebel of the Triblive High School Sports Network about WPIAL football realignment for the 2024 fall season. Don, as it sits right now, Aliquippa is in Section 1 in Class 5A with Fox Chapel, North Hills, Penn Hills, Pine Richland, Plum, and Shaler. 6A remains 7 teams, Canamac, Central Catholic, Hempfield, Mount Lebanon, North Allegheny, Norwin, Seneca Valley. I'm not going to read all the teams that have made switches to the conferences, but some other highlights in Class 5A, Armstrong, Latrobe, and Kiski also joined 5A in Section 2. 4A, Bell Vernon jumps over from 3A to 4A for the first time in a long time after winning back-to-back state titles in Class 3A. Section 1 and 4A, I wanted to note this. Looks like the old Parkway Conference. Ambridge, Blackhawk, Montour, Newcastle, West Allegheny. Out of 6A, 5A, 4A, any surprises, anything to note?
Well, I mean, the one thing that continues to be an issue since the realignment to 6 classifications is the amount of schools in the higher classifications continues to dwindle. Now, 6A actually is the exception. The last 2 years, 6A football has had 5 teams. 5 teams. So you're playing 4 section games. One of the teams, I don't know if it was North Allegheny or if it was Canada McMillan, they were playing a conference games in week 1, week 2, and then didn't have another one until week 8. And plus, it's become very predictable because every playoff game is a rematch. You're playing every team in your classification in the regular season, so every playoff game's a rematch. It has not helped. The expansion has not helped 6A football. Now we're seeing 5A starting to shrink a little bit. And this cycle of 2 years, 4A has actually been dinged. They had 23 teams the last 2 years. They're down to 17 teams. So the bigger schools' numbers continue to shrink, which is not good. Now, that's good news for the smaller schools because they continue to grow. And it's the complete opposite in Central PA and Eastern PA, where because a lot of the smaller schools have merged, which hasn't really happened around here, most of the schools are in the top 3 classifications in District 3, which is the Harrisburg area, District 1, which is suburban Philadelphia. But that's not the case here, where we're bottom heavy. Most of the schools in 3A, 2A, and Class A.
Don, do you miss the traditional rivals? I mean, I went to Montour, so we hated Moon. We played center, of course, that's gone. But do you feel like every Friday night you get powerhouse teams, but you don't get these rivalries where people have hated Hopewell their whole life? Their daddy hated Hopewell, their grandpa hated Hopewell, and we're getting on with Hopewell. Has that been lost, in your opinion, in WPIAL football?
There's no question that's been lost. Now, with the advent of week 0, where schools can schedule whoever they want, some of those rivalries, you see that in those late August matchups, but it's not the same. It's not the same as, facing a traditional team, a neighbor that with everything, the conference championship at stake in late October. So yeah, that has definitely been affected by the realignment. Now, new rivalries come together, but it's not the same when you're talking about decades of 2 school districts playing each other, and then that goes away. That's not good for anybody either.
What can they do?
It's not going to go back. I mean, the best thing for this district, District 7, and there's 12 districts in the PIAA. WPIAL is District 7, would be to go back to 4A, 4 classifications. That's not going to happen. I guess right now it's just making the best of what you have. When you have 5 teams, 5 schools in a classification, only 5, it's ridiculous. I always felt bad for the Cathedral Preps and the McDowells of the world back in the day. The WPIL had 25, 30 teams in a class in 4A. These teams had to go to New York, had to travel to Ohio, had to travel 2 hours to Altoona or State College just to play a regular season game because they didn't have any other big schools up in the Erie area. Well, we've suddenly become that where, most of the games for these teams are non-conference games, and you guys are former athletes. You know that there's a big difference between maybe fantasy owners. There's a big difference between a conference game.
Troop still hasn't finished the laps his coach told him to run in 1997.
Someday.
True story.
Between a conference game where those games are the ones that decide if you make the playoffs or not, and a non-conference game where you compete every Friday in the fall and you want to win, but you also aren't going to risk, a player banged up. He's not probably going to suit up, and you played a little more conservative. So it is far from perfect. And the thing is, unless something drastic happens, and there are some ideas out there to drastically change the landscape of alignment, unless that happens, it's going to be more of the same. And another thing is too, just the lopsided contest between the haves and the have-nots continues to grow as well.
I just know that Ed Troop, being a Bell Vernon Leopard, is never going to wear a Thomas Jefferson jacket, whether he was homeless and freezing and it meant his life. He would never wear it. I don't know if that happens today with those communities.
Would you wear a moon jacket if you were homeless?
Never. I'd rather freeze to death.
Well, Bell Vernon is back in the same section in Class 4A now with TJ, so that'll be exciting for my Leopards. You know, guys, I mean, interesting, Don, just to kind of piggyback off the 6A discussion. As both of you know, I'm in Cannon Mac. I coach my youngest son, Brendan, in youth football, and our South Hills Football League, we play Upper St. Clair, South Fayette, Peters Township, Bethel Park. But all those schools, from a WPIAL high school standpoint, are in 5A. Cannon Mac's by themselves in 6A. Based on enrollment. We have Cannon Mac has one of the largest enrollments, I think, next to North Allegheny and Seneca Valley in all the WPIL. So they're in 6A, but it's been dominated by three teams over the years: North Allegheny, Mount Lebanon, and Central Catholic. Those are the three, and then everyone else pretty much behind them, Don. And I know that's been a frustrating thing for the Cannon Mac football community. Every year they're hyping things up, they're ready to go, but yet those three teams standing in their way in a very small classification.
Well, and what rivalry is there? Okay, Mount Lebanon, that's fair. But, Central Catholic, you got to travel to Oakland or wherever Central Catholic's playing that particular night. North Allegheny is a trek up 79. Seneca Valley is a further trek up 79. I mean, there aren't the natural rivalries. And if you ask, when this all started happening and 6A was shrinking and shrinking, I said, why don't some of the 5A schools play up? And they don't want, to be honest, again, it goes back to the boundaries, non-boundary. They don't want any parts of playing against Central Catholic because that's a program that is loaded numbers-wise. They traditionally have 90-some players on their roster. And if you're a 5A school with, 50 guys on your roster, you don't want any parts of that. So, I mean, in the same with North Allegheny.
One night that my son's good enough at football that Jesus wakes him up in the middle of the night and says, "Si, we're sending you to private Catholic school." I just hope he's good enough.
Hey, we have a few more minutes left here, Don, and I do want to transition for our final topic, because if I don't talk about the Pirates, I'm not sure Brian will talk to me for the next week. He's missed the last 3 or 4 weeks, and that's all I've done is talked about the Pirates at the start of the broadcast, or the podcast, I should say. But here at the end, let's talk about it. 13-11, 3-7 though in their last 10. A little bit of a rough patch for the Pirates here in the last week. They're in 4th place in the NL Central, but they have won 2 straight, defeating the Milwaukee Brewers the last 2 nights at PNC Park. Good starting pitching. Bednar comes in, gets 2 saves. Connor Joe leading the team and hitting at .299, 13 RBIs. McCutcheon's been hot these last 2 games, leading off with back-to-back home runs. He has 3 to lead the team so far. That's a little bit of a downer that he has 3 home runs, and that's the lead home run hitter for this team. And Jared Jones continues to be a bright spot in the pitching rotation, 2-2, but an ERA of 2.79 and 39 strikeouts on the season. Dawn, before I get to you, let's start with Brian. Brian, your thoughts now. We're about a month in to the Pittsburgh Pirates 2024 season.
Well, first of all, this just shows your bias because what you just put together there was like a 30-second recap of every player. But if it was football and the Steelers, you would have broken that down section by section. So your bias is so ridiculous, and everyone sees it, including Dawn. But I will say this. It's so early, but where are the bats, right? The bats have been, I think there's 5 guys right now in our starting lineup batting under 200. McCutcheon doesn't seem to understand the strike zone as precisely as he did last year, although he had 2 homers in the last 2 games. That's great. But he doesn't see it as much, and so he's going to be a difficult DH hitter if we get into some interesting baseball this summer because he doesn't really hit that much. And right now it's still too early. They say don't look at the record until Memorial Day, so I'm going to do that and just say let's stay around 500. And the biggest goal right now is to make sure we're good enough in June to bring up Paul Skeens. Back to you, Ed, you biased pirate hater.
Well, wait a minute. Hold on. Before we get Dawn's comments, I highlighted their top offensive guy, their top pitcher, their highlight of the week.
Connor Joe.
I told you what they did in the last 10 games. What else do you want from me at this point? What else do you want from me?
I'm just saying, if we were on a date right now, if you really wanted to be on a date with me, you would go,
okay.
You smell so beautiful. What are you wearing? And then when I would answer, then you'd go, oh, and you look so great. Where did you get that blouse? You're on a terrible date with me, so you go, oh, your hair smells, you smell good, your hair looks good, that shirt looks good. What do you want to eat? I've been saying we're on a bad date because you have a bias towards the Pirates. It's okay, Dawn. I've dealt with this for 30 years, Dawn. I get it. It's okay.
Brian, I'm not going to get your back on this.
It's a lonely man's club.
I am holding the flag at the F troop. I mean, it is what it is. I think are they going in the right direction as a team? Yeah. Baby steps. And that's all it's ever going to be. I mean, they have got some good, they have some talent. When you're picking in the top 10 every year, top 5, top 1, you better have some talent.
Right.
The fact that decisions are always made, and we're seeing that now with the handling of the young arms. And I know the mindset of modern day baseball is, hey, 55 pitches, you're done. Hey, great job.
Right.
You got some talent. Let these guys lose. I guess the attitude of let's worry about tomorrow just is always prevailing with this franchise. I don't know that this is a strong division. You got off to the great start. Now you've come back to earth. But if they do get on another run, then have the mentality of let's try to get it this year. Let's try to win this year. You never know what's going to happen 4, 5, 6 years from now. So I don't know that they're never going to be the whole, and this goes back to the Neil Huntington days of, well, we want to be a franchise that contends every year. That ain't happening.
You can't.
It's not in most small market DNA, and the fact that this small market refuses to spend. I mean, there are some. Milwaukee's a great example. When they have a competitive team, their owner, he's come out and said, I'll risk losing money to put a winning team to have a chance to have success in the playoffs. Not just, hey, we are in a wild card game.
But look, and that's Kansas City too on the lowest level. Kansas City won the World Series how many years ago, and now they're a joke. But they're the Pirates. They risked it all for 1 year to get it, and I don't know. Before I die, I'd like to see that. So I
lived it. I lived. 60 was before my time, but I barely remember 71. I remember 79. It was awesome. And if you can do what Kansas City did, just when all the young players are starting to peak and you put the money in to bring in players that will make a difference, then for all of you guys, you younger guys, that's, again, it's never going to be sustainable. But if you can have that one magical year like Kansas City fans enjoyed a few years ago, isn't that worth it?
Do it. Ask Kansas City if they still celebrate that World Series. They do, and that's just the way it goes.
Yep.
And it's a competitive. The pitch count thing is maddening because I don't think you see it a lot with every team. But it's also a competitive disadvantage. When we played against the Mets last week, this is where Ed falls off the seat. They knew going in that Jones, for whatever reason, I'm not exactly sure because he pitched a lot. Ed left. We had a lot of.
He fell off the seat.
He died. His nurse brought him back. So when we played the Mets last week and we did get swept, Jones had a great start, but he threw 50 pitches and they pulled him.
Right.
That was public information that we were pulling him after 50 to 55 pitches. What a competitive advantage to the Mets, who are off to a great start. And a lot of people say that they'll be in the playoffs again. They knew all you had to do, foul a couple of these off because he's beating the crap out of us. We just got to get him off the mound. And we know if we can give him an inning of 15 to 20 pitches with a couple foul balls, do it. He's going to leave no matter what. So competitively and having your hands tied, like you said, Don, having your hands tied saying that there's a pitch count come hell or high water, that's one thing. But then also competitively, you can't win games that way when that's your strategy.
Right. Agree.
Well,
we're going to have to end it there, fellas, with the Bucko talk for this week.
Bucko
Brian,
talk was like 5 minutes of Bucko talk. We talked about St. Joe's Prep for 30.
That's enough. No muss.
That's enough.
Brian, I was up until these past two games, I was prepared to bury the Buccos this week with you. But, hey, they've gotten back-to-back
wins.
Turn
off the lights. The Bucko talk is over.
They're showing some light. They're showing some life at this point as they have two more against the Brewers at PNC Park this evening, and then tomorrow a afternoon Thursday game before they hit the West Coast. And, real quick, before we wrap it up, let me give you one little another tidbit here, Brian, and get your opinion. Last year, they got off to that hot start those first 2 months, but then they got into the meat of their schedule, their more competitive part of their schedule. Things fell apart. They're almost about to do that again. They have a tough West Coast trip coming up here starting this Friday. I think they go to San Francisco to play the Giants. Do they go to Anaheim to play the Angels, or the Angels?
They play everybody.
Yeah, they play everybody out there in the next 10 days. So that's going to be a tough stretch for them, but a good test to see how good this baseball team really is.
Well, we were last year, if you remember, we had like the World Series preview, which I think I called it to you several times. It turned out, I don't know what year I meant, but I still stand by those words. We went and we got swept by Tampa Bay, and then we got swept by the Blue Jays, and we never looked back as we went down, as we kept flushing ourselves deeper into the toilet. Hopefully we avoid that. The only good part, here's the silver lining, guys, and then I'll exit stage left. I'll see myself out. I would rather lose to Boston than lose to the Brewers. We're really good at losing to the Reds and the Brewers, and that's what eliminates us if we can stay somewhat competitive. So for now, let's see where it goes. Everything's fine, right? I feel like everything's on fire, and I'm like, it's fine. It's fine.
It sounds like Don and I, after the Steelers lose back-to-back games at Accushore against teams that have only won 2 or 3 games all year. Wait a minute, that happened this past year, huh?
Yeah.
Sounds like us.
Still made the playoffs.
Hey, Don Rebel, thank you for coming on the show. We always enjoy it. We'll definitely have you on again as the summer progresses and we get into more Steeler talk for the upcoming season, and also WPIAL football talk. Of course, Don, the spring season for the WPIAL is well underway as well. Make sure you check out Don at the Triblive High School Sports Network for all their coverage, articles every day, interviews. Don has his own podcast, The Rebel Yell. Make sure you check that out.
Have not gotten an invite to that yet.
Well, when you take over at WPIAL team, we'll get you on that podcast.
Hey, Don, can I say something before Ed gives you the hook?
Sure.
My daughter, Ellie, is in 9th grade in Moon. Don't tell anybody, but I still hate Moon. And I've gotten to know so many parents, and they don't know you, but your name is spoken amongst parents whose kids play in sports that are not basketball and not football, and you give it the same care. And on behalf of them, thank you for all those years, because it is so meaningful to parents and kids who don't get a light that you give them. So I want to thank you on their behalf.
That means a lot. I appreciate that, Brian. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. Not just football in the fall. Every single WPIAL high school sport covered exclusively, or I shouldn't say exclusively. Very not exclusively.
Watch it, Ed. Watch it.
Oh, geez, don't say exclusive.
Yeah, we don't want to use that word anymore. But
we don't want to be dragged into the courts.
But still, the.
Oh no, he froze at the wrong time.
Well, now you got to wrap it up, Brian.
Yeah, his lawyer was like, "Just pull the plug. Don't speak anymore."
He mentioned exclusive in the.
That's right. Well, Don, thanks. I guess this is the end. It was great to see you, and hopefully we get to get you back on here before football and all those exciting spring sports.
I appreciate your kind words, your kind wishes, and I wish you two the best of luck. You guys are doing a great job with this Three Rivers podcast.
Boy, this show got so much better when Troop freezes. I feel more relaxed. I might start talking about Akina Williams for a little bit. Finally, I can breathe and do the show.
That's right.
All right, Don, thanks.
All right, Brian,
I don't know
take
how to
care.
turn this off, though. Troop's gone. I'm in my bedroom. I'm like Trump when he's like, that's my 600-pound guy sitting on his bed.
We have just flown off the rails.
Troop's gone. He mentions the exclusive. Oh, wait. He mentioned something exclusive, and his lawyers pull the plug. Well, thanks, Don. I think Ed can somehow hear us and somehow hit the button to end this.
We can only hope.
Yeah. All right. Well, Don Rebel, thanks.
Thanks, Brian. Take care, pal.
All right, guys. All right. I don't know what Ed's going to do now, but I think he's going to hit the button to cut us off. Wait.